And sisters, the Lord is with you.
And also with you.
We continue listening to God speak to us from the gospel and the tradition of Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, speaking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, behold, a great cloud cast a shadow over them. And then from the cloud there was a voice that said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate and were very much afraid. Jesus came and touched them and said, "Get up and don't be afraid." And when the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus. And when they were coming down the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, "Don't tell the vision to anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." This is the gospel, the good news of our salvation.
Praise to you, Lord.
By the words of the gospel, may our sins be blotted out.
Amen.
I always like this gospel because it leads into a little joke that I heard many years ago, and I've probably told you this before. Depending upon what version of the gospel story you're reading or what translation, it says here, "And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus charged them." Here it says, "Tell the vision to no one." In another translation, it says, "Television to no one." So they had televisions back then. Okay, that's enough. We've heard the story of the Transfiguration many times, and we've heard preachers preach about it. Tonight, I want to look at that first reading because we don't hear that much about the call of Abram and Sarah. And every once in a while it pops up, but we don't really kind of focus in on it. Think about it. There are 2 things that are needed: faith and trust. And I'm not talking about a religious experience now. Faith and trust. And if you want to test that, take a ride on 95. And faith and trust. Faith that you'll get home alive, and trust that the guy who's driving next to you knows what the hell he's doing. Those 2 things we need to live: faith and trust. And it can, in any aspect of our lives, any aspect of our lives. We're talking about a man who's 75 years old, has some kind of religious experience. And as it says in the story, God told him to take his family and move to a land that I will show you, a land flowing with milk and honey, and there you'll become the father of a great nation. Now, the man is 75 years old. I don't know how big this nation is going to be. And so, we don't know exactly how this took place. The story doesn't give us a lot of information about who he packed up. We know his nephew Lot went with him. We know historically that there was a lot of movement of people in this area called the Fertile Crescent, from the north to the south, from the south to the north, depending upon the climate, depending upon the availability of food for their animals. Be that as it may, we have a man of 75 years old picking up and leaving everything that he knows behind because of a dream, a theory, a voice he heard. And he begins this journey, but more importantly, he begins our story. Timothy Radcliffe, I've been reading a lot, and he's my new best friend forever, talks about the story. And we all are part of this story. And we see Jesus coming down from this experience on Mount Tabor. Those three disciples, probably gagas, or you see something that you don't believe. They're charged, they can't tell anybody, so you have 9 disciples at the bottom of the hill saying, okay, what went on up there? And you can't say anything because of what Jesus said. But you have Jesus now going to Jerusalem, and in the old Vulgate, the first English translation from the Latin, it says that Jesus set his face like flint towards Jerusalem and would not be swayed. He would not be swayed. He knew that was where he had to go. And the story seems to have come to an end, especially at the Last Supper, when he says, and one of you will betray me. So let's go back to the beginning of the story. Abram takes his family and moves to this land, supposedly, that is going to make him a father of many people, a father of a great nation. And in faith and in trust in God, Abram follows through. Lent is an opportunity for us to look at our relationship with God. We've talked about that, that Lent is really not a time to give up. It's not a time to beat ourselves up. Life does that well enough as it is. We don't need a time to beat ourselves up. We get beat up quite a bit enough. With our health issues, with work, with this, that, and the other thing, with the relationships with other people, whatever it might be. But we have enough sorrow in our life. We don't need to exemplify it just because it's Lent and cause any more problems. And so we look at this 40 days, this period of preparation, really. And we are in a situation where faith and in trust, we follow that story. Abram gave up everything he knew and followed this thought, this dream, this possibility. And because he did that, he became the father of 3 major religions. He became the father of the Hebrews, he became the father of the Christians, and he became the father of the Muslims. So the 3 great religions in the world were founded from the same man. Now, whether he knows that or not, I don't know. I wonder if he, along with God, kind of shakes his head and says, you know, of all the religions in the world, the ones that I have had, or father of, have had more wars and fighting than any other. But let's take it to this day, to our story. Here we sit in this little church here on this Saturday afternoon. And we're part of the story. We're in that story in the sense that our lives are a journey. And it depends on how can I say this? It depends on how our faith and our trust, how strong it is, that this journey is a journey that ends in peace. With all the bumps, with all the potholes, with all the twists and the turns and the road our journey is taking, we have to be people of trust and of faith. We have to be able to be people that will say yes when the Lord calls us to do something that was outside of our thought or our imagination. Father Joe and I have often talked about this, that there were days when being a priest was the furthest thing from our lives, from our understanding or from our desire. And yet, the Holy Spirit, in her wisdom and in her folly, tapped us on the shoulder and said, enough of this playing around, I need you to be my priest. The Holy Spirit taps each one of us on the shoulder as the Holy Spirit tapped Abram on the shoulder and asks of us many things. And sometimes our first words out of our mouth are, I'm not worthy. I was listening to a talk by Richard Rohr, the great Franciscan, and he said that when we use those words, I am not worthy, what I am really saying is, I don't want the responsibility. I don't want the responsibility of what it is that you want me to undertake. And so I would say, I am not worthy. Well, if worthiness was a criteria for anything, this church wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be sitting and listening to this preacher because we would not be worthy. And so tonight we think about, hopefully, what Abram must have gone through. The decisions that he must have had to make. Now, whether the story is true or whether it is a story of how these people got from the land of Ur down to Palestine, it doesn't matter. The fact is that God touched his life and said, do this, and I will make you a father of a great nation. He didn't say, oh no, I'm not worthy. He said, yes, okay. I don't know where this is going to lead, but I'm willing to go with you. And that's what journeying is about. We don't know where it's going to lead. We don't know where we were going to be 20 years ago. If you would have said to me 20 or 30 years ago after my ordination that I'd be living in Florida and working with a renegade Catholic church, I would have said, what drugs do you take? But it happened. It happens, my brothers and sisters, and I didn't know why, but I'm here today. And you're here today. So listen to the Spirit this Lent. Listen to what she has to say. And let not those words go forth from her mouth that I am not worthy. That's why we changed in the Mass, O Lord, I am not worthy to receive you. And we changed it to, Lord, I was not worthy to receive you, but you have said the word, and I have been healed. And that's what we have to do. Trust and faithfulness in the Spirit as she journeys with us down a road less traveled.